Hello Raptors fans, and welcome to this week's episode of Raptors Report. Today we'll be examining Pascal Siakam's return to the lineup, as well as breaking down the emergent play of OG Anunoby. Let's jump in. The Raptors have had an up and down start to the season, with some strong defensive play, a great transition attack, breakout rookies, and strong individual performances from veterans like Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby. On the flip side, and I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, is the Raptors' half-court offense, which ranks near the bottom of the league. Enter Pascal Siakam. Now, there are nasty rumors floating around that Pascal Siakam is a bad player. Those rumors are largely based upon Siakam's bubble performance 2 years ago, which is fair, and also the highlights of him missing shots at the end of games last season, which is not really that fair. The truth is that when healthy, Pascal Siakam is a very good player who is not only strong on the defensive end, but also a guy that can both score and make plays in the half-court, which is something that the Raptors are dying for. For the past 2 seasons, Siakam has been a 20-point scorer. And while it's true that his efficiency dipped when he was asked to be the prime offensive player on the team, his ability to put the ball on the floor, attack the basket, and make plays for others are skills that the Raptors could use desperately right now. Last season, Siakam added an element to his game that I think bodes well for the Raptors, which is his playmaking and vision. Despite using fewer possessions, Siakam's assist rate went way up, and he was noticeably making very nice passes to players in scoring spots and helping to run the Raptors' half-court sets. With Aaron Baines and his penchant for missing bunnies around the rim being replaced by Scotty Barnes and Khem Birch, 2 strong finishers around the rim, I think Siakam's passing game will flourish even more. The on-off numbers from last season say that when Siakam was on the court, the Raptors were competent offensively. But when he left, the offense went into the toilet. Per 100 possessions, the Raptors were 8 points better offensively when Siakam was on the court last season. That's huge! If the Raptors can bring their half-court sets from poor to average and keep everything else the same, they will be one of the best teams in the league. They're still shooting roughly 10 more shots than their opponents per game, so imagine if they weren't bottom 10 in efficiency. Scary stuff. Siakam also adds another great defender to Toronto's stable of tall, agile forwards, meaning that it's still going to be a very scary, switching, scrambling defense. Prior to the season, I predicted that there would be some rough sailing prior to Siakam re-entering the lineup. But the Raptors have been able to hover around 500, even with Siakam out of the lineup, as well as through the difficult process of incorporating him back into the rotation. Another interesting element to this is that Siakam will be absorbing minutes from players who have been underperforming. With Siakam in the lineup, that means that Chris Boucher and Precious Achiuwa will have reduced roles where they can get back to being effective role players. Needless to say, I'm excited to see what the Raptors can do now that Siakam has returned. Next, let's talk OG Anunoby. Louis Zatzman of Raptors Republic wrote a very cool piece for the famed stats publication 538, where he laid out OG Anunoby's rise in comparison with other star forwards who have followed a comparable career trajectory. In it, he laid out the similarities between OG, Jaylen Brown, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, starting from their humble beginnings as defensive role players who scored infrequently, and their eventual rise to becoming star scorers after a couple of seasons. I won't go too far into the article's details because you should read it, especially if you like to drill down on stats as much as I do, but the idea is a fascinating one. OG Anunoby, a guy who many tap to be a contender for the Most Improved Player award, has certainly taken a big step this season. But is he really on a star trajectory? In my opinion, yes. Because Louis took the statistical approach, I'll focus on some of the qualitative things that I've noticed about OG's game, and how I think it will carry forward into the season, and beyond. The baseline for OG Anunoby when he was drafted was his potential as a 3-and-D player. His physical profile, athleticism, and feel for the game on the defensive side of the ball made the D part of the 3-and-D package an almost certainty. The 3 part of the package developed his first 2 years as a respectable mid-30s three-point shooter on decent volume to the past 2 seasons, where OG became an elite three-point shooter at nearly 40% per game on great volume. If OG never developed beyond that point, he would be a perfectly serviceable role player that many NBA teams would love to have on their squad. OG had higher ambitions, however, and over the past 2 seasons he has devoted time to working on a more complete scoring game. This is actually an incredibly impressive improvement curve from OG Anunoby, because his first few seasons in the league he showed almost no promise as a scoring option in the NBA. His moves were raw, he looked tentative, and he could barely dribble. Even now, after seasons of growth and work, you can tell that OG is not a, quote, natural scorer. What I mean by that is, from an aesthetic perspective, OG's moves kind of look a bit robotic and machine-like, rather than someone who I would consider a natural scorer, guys like Curry, Luka, Tatum, who all have that kind of fluid, loose style that makes the game look a lot easier than it is. OG's moves are reminiscent of Kawhi Leonard, not just because of their remarkably similar body types, but also because both have that kind of no-wasted movement, precise moves that seem like they're born of extreme amounts of practice, rather than something that they picked up just naturally. First, let's look at the moves themselves. OG diligently worked the past few off-seasons to improve his handle and scoring repertoire. This past season, he worked with Handle Life, aka Dribble Too Much, to refine his ability to get into the lane, probably the part of his game that required the most work. The results have been very positive. He's scoring 5 more points per game and is actually committing fewer turnovers, even with the added usage. Now, OG is a big guy. He's very strong and rugged, and will take contact in order to finish inside. So being able to use the handle in order to get in there is probably something that he wanted to develop. This season, he's made a point of mentioning that there is a discrepancy between his activity in attacking the basket and his low free throw rate. And he has a point. Even fans who are sick of the foul hunting circus act that the NBA became the past decade or so would agree that one of the most legit ways of getting to the line is to take the ball inside. OG goes to the basket at a good clip, shooting about 40% of his 18.5 shots from within 10 feet of the basket. Despite the fact that OG is shooting more shots near the rim, he's shooting virtually the same amount of free throws as last season, which is a bit weird. Although I think that this might be something that changes soon. OG had a very rough first 2 games of the season, where he shot a miserable 7 for 34 from the field. But since then, he's been a model of efficiency, scoring 22 points per game on 45% from the field and 40% from 3. He was downright amazing in New York versus the Knicks, where he scored 36. And he's been the Raptors' leading scorer through 15 games. I think that unless there are big issues integrating Siakam into the offense, OG is primed to continue his very impressive play. And that's this week's episode. What are your thoughts on the Raptors integrating Siakam back into the lineup so far? Is OG going to continue his ascent into NBA stardom? Please let me know in the comments here on YouTube as well as on Twitter, where you can find me at Raptors Report. I'm always happy to hear from other Raptors fans, even if your perspective differs from my own. Also, please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, as it really helps the channel grow. And as always, thank you for watching Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.